Okay, we've been talking about if and the else construct to make decisions. Now, it is possible that you're going to get into a situation where you might have to have multiple conditions that need to be met, and this is where we can get into like the nested if situation. So, what we have here is we have a simple program that allows us to evaluate if a person qualifies for a loan or not. Now, there are two requirements for them to get the loan. The first requirement is their salary has to be greater than or equal to the minimum salary requirement. We've defined the minimum salary requirement up here as $30,000. We also, if that is true, then we have to make sure that their years on the job is greater than or equal to the minimum number of years qualified, which we have set to 2 here. So if their salary is greater to the minimum salary and their years on the job is greater than the minimum years, then they qualify. So what this is doing is this is allowing them to do 2 conditions and find out if these are true. Okay? Go ahead and take a couple seconds if you want to go ahead and type this in, and then we'll come back and explain more of what's going on. Okay, so now that you're back and got this typed in, again, we have decided that we have a minimum salary requirement to qualify for the loan. We've got it set to $30,000. We have a minimum number of years that somebody needs to be working to qualify for a loan. So what we're doing is we're prompting our user to enter in their annual salary. We're then prompting the user to give us how many years on the job they're actually working. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, now if their salary is greater than or equal to the minimum salary, if that's true, we drop down into this inner if or nested if as defined. We then decide, okay, are their years on the job greater than or equal to the number of years? If that's true, then this statement is printed. If this statement is false, then this statement is printed. If this statement here is false, it'll never get to this inner if. So if this is false, it immediately goes to this else and prints this. This is how the nested ifs work. Okay? So the only way we get to this inner if construct is if first this is true. Okay? So let's take a look at how this works. So after I've got it, I go ahead and save it. I've already saved mine. I'm going to go up to run, and I'm going to run this program. And as you can see, it's going to prompt me for my annual salary. So let's say I'm making $35,000 a year. Okay, so I'm making about $17 an hour. So I'm going to hit enter, and it wants to know how many years I've been employed. Okay, so let's say I have been employed at least the minimum number of years, so 2. You notice it says you qualify for the loan because both this and this were true, and that's the key here. Because this is a nested if in this scenario, it is a this and this must be true for this to occur. So let's look at it a little bit differently. Let's go ahead and rerun this again. And this time, I'm going to make slightly less than the annual salary requirement. But I have worked at my place of business for at least the minimum number of years required. But you notice it says, you must earn at least $30,000 per year to qualify. So what happened was this is false. So because that's false, it immediately goes down to this else to print this statement here. Okay? So that's what happens. So let's do this one more time. And this time, we're going to make sure that, hey, you know what? We do make enough money to qualify, but we only have worked for 1.5 years. Notice it says, you must have been employed for at least 2 years to qualify. So because this was true, we did go down into this inner if construct, but this evaluated false. And since it evaluated false, it immediately went to this statement. So nested ifs can be hugely beneficial depending on exactly what you're trying to evaluate. The way I look at it is this contingent on this? Meaning, do both of these things need to be true in order for something to happen? Or how does that work? And there's a scenario for everything, and you can look at it. Let's take a look at another example. Let's see, where's one of my other examples? Oh, we already did that one. Here we go. Here's another nested if example. Okay, now this one's a little bit uglier, but we'll talk about that here in a minute. For now, I have some variables I declared. A score, 90, that's my base score to get an A. My base score for a B is 80, C, and D as shown. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to prompt the user to give me the score of their test. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. And once I get the score for their test, I'm going to let them know if they got an A, a B, a C, a D, or an E. So if their grade is greater than or equal to their A score, meaning they've got something that's 90 or above, it's going to print this statement because this will be true. Now, if this is false, it's going to go to this else condition. Well, inside this else, I have another nested if here. Okay? So in this case, I say, okay, well, since this was false, I went to my else. Okay, now, is this true? Well, if that's true, then it prints your grade's a B. But if this is false, it goes to this else, which leads me to this statement. And if this is true, it prints this. Otherwise, it's false, and it goes to this one. So this is another scenario where we can do a nested if, but the thing that's different with this is one's not necessarily contingent on the other, meaning I don't have to have this and this. Right now, we're getting into more of that or kind of scenario, meaning I'm either going to have a grade greater than an A score or a grade greater than a B score or a grade greater than a C score, okay? This is more of an or scenario. Now, you could continue to do these kinds of things with an if and an else and an else and another if, another else, and you could go further and further and further down the rabbit hole because this will work, okay? Go ahead and pause the video, take a couple seconds and type this in. Again, be cautious of your indentation. Make sure you have that because remember, for every if, you want to make sure your else is lined up with it. Okay? So go ahead and take a couple seconds and type this in. We'll come back and run it and talk about it. Okay, so now that you're back, let's go ahead and run this. Now, I've already saved mine, so go ahead and save it and click on Run. We will run the module and enter in my test score. Okay, let's say we got an 87 on our test. Your grade is a B. Okay, let's try it again. Let's run this again, and we'll try a different score. We'll say they got a 79%. Your grade's a C. So you can see that this is evaluating all of these statements appropriately. However, as you look at this, it's really kind of messy. It really is. And as you go through, you're going to find, let's just say you decide to get into the whole A minus, B plus, B minus thing. These if statements are going to go in and in and in and in and in, and it's going to get really bad looking. And it's going to become that point where it's going to be very hard to understand exactly what's happening. Fortunately, we have a resolution for that. It's called the else if. Okay, ELIF. If you've taken and looked at other programming languages, whether it be C or C#, C++, Visual Basic, even like Bash, shell scripting, things like that, we have something very similar to what they call a case or a switch statement. Python doesn't have a case or a switch. So what Python uses to do something similar to that are these else ifs. Now, what makes an else if different? Well, with a normal else statement to like what we looked at earlier, okay? So these else statements we looked at earlier, they do not have a condition that you can evaluate. That's the rule of an else. You cannot put a condition with it. However, with the else if, you absolutely can put a condition with it. So you get the else and the if combined. This works the exact same way, okay? You still got to keep your spacing, your indentation, things like that. But notice now, rather than having the if and then the if and then the else and another if, another else, instead of having so many nested if and else statements, we're able to simplify things and streamline things. So what happens is it first evaluates this. If that's true, then it prints a statement. However, if this is false, it goes this else if, but then it evaluates this condition for me to see if that's true. Again, if that's false, it goes to the next else if, evaluates here, and so on and so forth. To where ultimately we do have our last else that's going to be our catch-all for everything else. Okay? Again, this else, there's no condition for it. It's just a simple else, and it is what it is. Just like before, we have the if. We do not require an else. But after each if or else if statement, you have to have at least something you're going to do. Okay? Whether it be print or something, something has to be done. Okay? Something has to be done. So if we run this, again, I've already saved mine, but go ahead and if you have not already typed this in, go ahead and pause the video and go ahead and type it in. Again, watching your indentation and your colons. All right, so that you got typed in, let's go ahead and save it. And you can do that by either going to File, Save, or you can do it when you run. I've already saved mine, so I'm going to go up to Run. I'm going to run the module. And it says, okay, enter your test score, okay, down here at the bottom. So I'm going to test mine with the same scores that I did with the last program. So 87. Oh, your score is a B. That's good. I'm going to test it again. Run. And we're going to try it with a 79 this time. And it shows that I got a C. So the idea here with these ifs and elses and such things like that, there are ways in which you can make your life simpler if you want to use the else if construct. Okay, again, it just comes back to what are you trying to do with your program. Okay, if you get into a scenario where you're doing a lot of this kind of thing, if else, if else, if else, if else. If you're getting to a scenario where you're doing that, then perhaps this here will be more favorable to using that. If you say, okay, well, if this is true, let's do that. But if that's not true, I need to evaluate another condition, see if that's true, before I can make my final decision. That's really where the else if comes in handy, because the else if allows you to do a condition, whereas a simple else does not. Okay? Hopefully that helps further your understanding of the if, else if, and how those decision structures work. And remember, this is all about making decisions. This does not do anything about looping or repetition. This is simply, we're going to make a decision based on some condition we've put forward. It's either going to be true or false, a yes or a no, a 1 or a 0. There's no gray area when it comes to an if statement. It's either true or not. Same with an else if. It's either true or not. If it's true, do what the if wants you to do. If it's false, look at your alternatives, either an else if or an else. Okay? All right. As always, if you have questions, feel free to contact me. Otherwise, I bid you good morning, good afternoon, good evening.